Coopers Creek catchment, the huge river system that flows southwest down into Lake Eyre. One of the most amazing desert ecosystems in the world and one of the last major dryland rivers anywhere in the world that's not been dammed or stuffed up in some regard.
Sometimes it can be as hard and unforgiving as anything, any desert in the world, but other times it can be so lush and so green and so beautiful and so forgiving and bountiful, and we need to understand that we just can't afford to lose that.
The big concern and the big unknown for all of us is this unconventional gas production, fracking in particular, and there's just so many questions that we don't know the answers to in regard to that process. The Cooper floodplain is where I grew up, and my family lived on the Cooper floodplain for 35 years, and that's an incredible part of the world, and obviously a part of the world that's very dear to my heart. Thalunga's it's a great old property. It's got a wonderfully rich history. It was settled by Patsy Durack in 1868, so it's nearing 150 years. Thalunga then went on to be owned by an English company for quite a significant period of time. It was the biggest sheep station in the world, and we're pretty privileged to own it at this point in time.
One of the good things about living out here is that I can be involved in agriculture and feel really good about it because we don't use chemicals. The floodplain is equal to any feedlot in the world after a flood. We're sitting here in Noonbar, part of the Lake Eyre Basin catchment. The Lake Eyre Basin is fed by a whole host of rivers, but three of the really big ones are the Cooper system, the Georgina and the Diamantina. Those three rivers are the last three major desert rivers left in the world. They support this incredible biodiversity and this boom-bust system that we get in the arid zone. There's no better example of it than here in these floodplain rivers.
The Channel Country in the Lake Eyre Basin is one of the great natural systems on the planet. The three rivers really bring life to the heart of Australia. The landscape is home to many species of wildlife. There's around 34 species of mammals, dozens of native fish species live in the rivers, and there's hundreds of species of birds, many of which that are found nowhere else on the planet.
All down the river system here there's been organic beef enterprises that set up shop. It's the largest organic enterprise by land area anywhere in the world.
We're beef producers, we're in conversion to organic, we intend being organic. Our intent was to run less cattle and generate similar returns and therefore have some seasonal and environmental insurance. Better for the country, less environmental impact, less change. Less change is better.
We rely on the flooding to a huge extent, and in a big rainfall year with big flooding, we just get this huge flooding event, and the pasture that comes up after that's just incredible. It's as good as the best feedlots anywhere in the world, and it's totally organic and natural.
So these flooding events, that boom and bust cycle you talk about, which is quite unique to this region, is about how this landscape works. It's actually agriculture's adapted to that natural cycle of the Channel Country.
State governments have a long history of protecting the rivers of the Channel Country. It started in the 90s when BT protected the Cooper from a large-scale cotton agriculture proposal. In 2011, the Bligh government put in place protection for the three Channel Country rivers. When the Newman government came into power, they removed those protections, which left the area exposed to the threat of unconventional gas mining.
Unconventional gas exploration involves basically looking underground through various geological investigation techniques for gas deposits. Typically what will happen once a deposit is identified through rock profiling, seismic investigation, some exploration wells will be drilled. Those wells are typically drilled both vertically down to the rock strata where they're targeting gas, as well as horizontally within those strata to try and maximise the area with which they can get gas out of the ground. In areas of shale gas or tight gas, the process also involves hydraulic fracturing, and so that's a process by which high volumes of fluid are pumped down these wells at high pressure in order to break up and create fracture networks within those rocks that then allows the gas to flow freely up the wells. There are two ways which fracking could impact surface water resources in a place like the Channel Country. The first would be through, inappropriate management and disposal of wastewater that comes from the hydraulic fracturing process. So when those high volumes of, potentially contaminating fluids are brought to the surface, that fluid, if it's not carefully managed, can easily make its way out into the environment. It could contaminate waterways, could contaminate shallow aquifers. The second way would be if there are conduits created through the gas wells themselves that allow the wells to basically bring gases or fluids from deep levels along those well casings up into shallow aquifers that sit below the Channel Country. And in an area like the Channel Country, these impacts will be felt, even more so than many other areas because of the natural scarcity of water resources and the importance of high quality water in those catchments.
Every hole has to be dug deep, very deep, up to 3 kilometres deep. Every hole has to be fracked, and they put different chemicals down there. And the one reality of drilling boreholes, the ones we drill, the ones the government drills, the one the companies drill, all boreholes fail in time.
Most of the agriculture that occurs in the interior regions in Australia is only possible because of the presence of the Great Artesian Basin. The Great Artesian Basin is actually the largest connected groundwater system in the world. It sits under about 20% of the Australian continent.
Part of the fracturing process generally involves dumping some very toxic chemicals down into those, either whether they're shale fields or coal seam gas fields. I just don't think we've got enough science that says that those chemicals are not going to end up back in our water table.
Any boreholes that aren't properly maintained or constructed within the Great Artesian Basin could pose a potential problem in terms of creating this pathway for contaminants to migrate from deep levels to shallow levels.
We've got very, very great, really good rigid structures in Australia to pick up chemical contamination in our food. If that was to happen, we would straight away lose our organic accreditation, but we would also be in danger of having a quarantine over our properties for any sort of food production. The exploration and the activities on that Cooper floodplain really concern me, both from an underground perspective and also from the effect of the impact of the operations above ground on what's really an incredible environment, but it's also very, very fragile. It's a country where water diversion, leaving a windrow 4 inches high on the edge of a road, can create a diversion that diverts millions of litres of water. It can be done by accident, and it can be done really, really easily. Without intentional malpractice, it can happen just by accident.
I think one of the things we really need to, as a community, think about when we're deciding about the long-term future and short-term future out here is what we want from it. I would like to see sustainable communities out here for a long, long time to come.
We should be taking steps to really reassure ourselves as an industry and as custodians of this environment that we should be working really hard to make sure that the practices that are being carried out by the resource companies are not lifting the levels of risks to unacceptable levels.
Beef or wool or sheep produced in a completely natural environment is a huge tag for any product, and if we're to preserve that, we need to make sure that we've got safeguards in place to preserve it.
It's unconscionable that anyone would allow these sort of activities actually out on the floodplain, and yet we're still doing it. So the job that we need to do as a community out in these parts of the world is say, no, we're in it for the long term. The resource sector will be here and gone again in a while, but they can destroy our future forever.
The life of a mine is a wink of an eye in the beef industry. It's nothing. And the life of a gas field is the wink of an eye. We're talking about an industry that's been around for generations, and when the resources are all exploited, we want this industry to be still here.
The Palaszczuk government committed to restoring the protection for the Channel Country rivers and floodplains at the last election. However, very little has been done to honour that commitment. With the looming threat of fracking on those floodplains, now is the time for the government to take action and restore the protection for those rivers.
The largest desert rivers left that aren't compromised, and They're just incredibly rich and incredibly important, not from just a local level, not from just a national level, they're internationally important. And with very little cost, just a bit of effort and a bit of understanding, we can actually keep them that way. Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't the governments help us do that?